Hello and welcome to this next iMesh video. So Blender artists have wanted Blender to be industry standard for quite a while, basically forever. Basically, the goal of Blender for Blender artists is for it to become industry standard. And I do understand why. It's an incredible piece of software which is totally free. But there are reasons why it isn't industry standard. For example, when you buy something like 3D Studio Max, you are paying basically for some extra support as well. So big studios where they desperately need this software to work. And if it doesn't work, they need to have access directly to the company to be able to communicate with them to figure things out. A bunch of other reasons. For example, if you go to university, you will learn these industry standard tools. And then you'll be expected when you move out of there to move into studios which use the same software. So you're taught from the very beginning. And there are many, many other reasons why Blender isn't industry standard. Now, one of the things about 3D Studio Max, for example, is that it has many, many professional tools like V-Ray or Corona. And now V-Ray have decided that they are going to start creating V-Ray inside of Blender. Now, Blender's obviously making waves at the moment, and every single iteration is becoming the most powerful free piece of software there ever is. And V-Ray has obviously noticed. So they have created a beta version of V-Ray inside of Blender. Now, I used to use V-Ray a lot a few years ago. I'm trying to relearn where all the buttons are. But from my experience with using V-Ray, it is so in-depth and it has so many buttons and so many parameters which you can adjust to create the perfect render for what you need. There is so many different buttons and features. If you imagine Blender is a video editor, render engine, 3D modeler, sculptor, and all these other tools. So when they release an update, it has to update all of these. Whereas V-Ray are a render engine only. So you'd imagine that they would have a lot of tools specific for rendering to give you the best effect. So now that they have agreed to put that into Blender, now this beta is a beta and there are bugs. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to just show you how I basically installed it, some things that I looked out for when installing it, and how I will set up basic lighting and how I would also set up some basic materials just to get you going with this. And I'd recommend you do follow this process. And while it is free right now, it's a great opportunity to learn how V-Ray works and other render engines. Now, V-Ray itself is one of the biggest in the world. I think I saw this document which said that 60% of all users use V-Ray, which is a huge percentage. I know it might be biased towards those kind of people who actually use that platform, but nevertheless, that is a huge percentage. So if you are going to look into get into this professionally and you're going to end up moving over to another piece of software like 3D Studio Max, to be able to learn V-Ray before you go there is a great help. So let's just jump straight into the video and learn some things. But before I start, we do have a course available for iMesh, which is how to create a full exterior office building. That was 50% off for Black Friday, but we've decided to keep it running. We've had great feedback from it, and people have started releasing some renders, and they're very happy with the results. So if you are interested in architecture visualization, then please do check out our course. And of course, do check out iMesh if you are looking to get your hands on a brand new career and actually start making money from this. Okay, so this is the actual download link for V-Ray, and you click join beta, and then you are taken to a questionnaire. Once you fill out the questionnaire, you can then download it. Now, I had already done this. So when I click on this button, it just says you're already part of the beta. And I just couldn't find the download link anywhere. But if you simply change this to be success, you can then download it. So if you're looking to download it, that's how I did it. Now, also, I had to go to their website. I honestly find it a little bit complicated, but if you can make it to like all their products, and then you go to scroll down to V-Ray standalone, you can then download also V-Ray 7. Now, when I was reading the installation guide for V-Ray beta, it didn't mention anything about actually downloading this on its own. Maybe it's been updated since then. But anyway, just download this because mine didn't work without it. So once you've downloaded the beta, you go over to Blender 4.2. I believe it's only available in 4.2. Now, once it's installed, you can go to Edit Preferences and type in V-Ray. Now, this is also what I did before. It doesn't show up. You have to type in V-Ray, and you can then enable V-Ray for Blender. So at that point, you should have access to Blender, V-Ray for Blender. Now, if we go over to the render settings, and the render engine, we can change that to be V-Ray. So V-Ray CPU, GPU, when I tried GPU and RTX, the render just looked different to CPU. I have quite a powerful CPU anyway, so I'm just gonna leave it at that. and you can just choose whatever you want. I think if you set it to RTX and you start using that and only use that, then you're probably not going to notice any difference anyway. But let's go CPU. So this is a little bit different. We do have a button here which opens up the frame buffer for V-Ray, and we basically have this extra panel here. And then we also have some other settings here, so we can also add a few curves, exposure, and things like that. So let's move this. I'm going to move that to my other window. We can also go to render preview here, and that also does the same thing. So this is now V-Ray, which is amazing. Right, let's start making a really basic scene. So I'm going to press Shift A, just add a mesh and a plane. Now we do need to have a light. Now, if I go to here and go to a V-Ray node editor, I can then set it to world, and then there's a new button here called Use V-Ray World Nodes. And if I go to render preview, we still can't see anything. Let's change this to be white, and we still can't see anything. Sometimes it needs to be updated. You just do this, and then it will update the render. But in this case, we just need to tick this box. So I can also need to turn on this one as well. So now we have the environment working. However, I don't use this personally. If I remember correctly, when I used to use V-Ray in the past, I would go over to here, Shift A, and add a light and add a dome light. Now, this, I believe, is optimized for things like ArcViz and other scenes, so it will be a faster render. So what we're going to do, I want to give this a material like a HDR. So I'm going to click on here and click on shader, and again use V-Ray light nodes, and then this time it's giving me this dome light. Now if I was to set this to be purple, let's have a look. I don't think, I might actually have to turn off this one as well, I'm not sure. Anyway, I think because that dome is in there, it's overriding the environment. Anyway, so if I change the light here, we get the color for the scene. And if I go to the light settings here, we can also see dome adaptive, and that's what need to be turned on. That's like the optimized sampling algorithm. There we go. So no light portals. So in Blender, you know, if you had a window, you need to add a light portal onto the window, but this one doesn't require that. So just make sure that is enabled. Now, if I go to add a bitmap, it's called V-Ray bitmap. I believe you can also search image, and it also shows up with a bitmap as well. But that's basically what they use for all of their image textures. Right, so I'm just going to find a HDRI, this one here, and then I'm just going to plug that into this one. And now we can see the HDR. Now, the good thing with having a dome light as well, if I press R to rotate, we can also rotate the environment, which is pretty cool, being able to visually see that happening. In V-Ray, in 3D Studio Max, I believe it actually has like a little pointer to say which way is north. But anyway, so now we have an object. I'm going to do Shift S because selected. I'm going to add a mesh. I'm going to add a Suzanne monkey, do Control 3, and there we go. So we now have a monkey. Let's bring this up. I do love how V-Ray now works inside of the viewport as well. But also, this is also going ahead here. So I don't know if this is just a direct connection or if it's actually having to render twice. But I think I can also close this and it still works. But if I need to bring back that frame buffer, I can just click that button. So basically, if I go over to here, let's actually just zoom out. So one of the things I like about V-Ray is I can go to here and I can do something like exposure. And I always like to just turn down the highlight burn, because if you see all these outdoor areas are very burnt out. So if this was, for example, using cycles, this would look the same using just the standard view transform. Whereas then you set it to something like AGX and it kind of compresses the highlights so they're not too overblown. So if I do this, slide this down, we can see more of the background. So I just want to bring it back so we can see stuff, something like that. And then this feels a little bit more natural to me. So if I slide that back up, this feels too blown out. But if I slide it back down, this feels nice. You can then also increase this. You can also increase some contrast and make a look that you're looking for. Now, this is also reflected inside of Blender as well. So actually, let's turn that off and do this here. So that will now be reflected here as well. So in this panel, if I was to increase the exposure, it works here as well. So that's really nice. Now, you might be wondering, well, how do you denoise? So if I go to here, this one, to turn on denoiser, I can then see there's a denoiser enabled here. I think I need to stop it and then start again. Okay, so that is now denoising. I don't know if there is a, for example, optics denoiser. I believe there is, but this looks like a standard denoiser to me, and it's a little bit strong. But anyway, if you want to have denoising, you can enable that. So let's turn that off. Right, now let's go here. We now have a scene, so let's start adding some materials. So I'm going to go to this material tab and click new. Okay, so my PC just crashed and I just lost that recording. So anyway, let's jump straight in from here and see where we get up to. So let's just, I'm just bring everything up like this. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a material. So with this object selected, I'm going to talk you through this V-Ray material. You need to make sure you're a V-Ray node editor. Make sure that you then go to shader editor. And I'm going to talk you through this, and then I'm going to talk about this little material converter that I have found. So let's go through this and explain what these settings are. So let's go to the render preview. And we can see here that this is rendering nicely. So the first thing I'm going to do is click on diffuse. So this is basically the diffuse color, as you'd imagine. I'm going to set it something a little bit darker. And then what I can then do is we can see that the reflection glossiness is set to 1. However, there's no glossiness at all. And that's referring to reflection color. So I can set this to something like this. I believe objects are usually around this point to this point. This would be like for a mirror, I believe. And I believe Blender by default is about this value. Correct me if I'm wrong, but anyway, this is the value I found. I also believe diffuse roughness should usually also be about 0.5, but this is like really fine tuning the colors of your object. So now we have this object. Now this is glossiness, and most things inside of Blender are usually using roughness. So if I press N, and go to properties, we have a lot more settings here. So if I go to reflection, and down here we have one called use roughness. So if I click use roughness, this is now saying, well, this should actually say roughness, and that should change to say this is 100% rough. If I set it to 0, that's now 100% gloss. I'm just going to turn that off for now, set it back to gloss. Right, and then we have a few other settings, which I'm not going to go over now. Set the metalness to 1, we get some metal objects. And then we also have some anisotropic effects. So let's just choose something like this, and we can choose the rotation for the anisotropy. Anyway, you can basically make some nice effects like that. But let's set this to be 0. Let's also remember this value that's here. It's by default it's 0. So anyway, that looks like metal. Now over basic material, we have diffuse, we've gone over glossy, we've gone over metal. So let's now do refraction. So for some glass, I'm going to set the reflection to be 1. I want it to be 100% reflective. And then also we're going to set glossiness to be 1 as well. Let's also set the color to white. And then I go down to refraction color, and then I'm going to set this to be white as well. Oh, I need to turn off metalness. There we go. So now we have a glass. If I delete the ground, we can see that this is glass basically. But glass, let's make it have some walls or thickness. I'm just going to add a solidify, and we could just increase this to maybe 0.03. And now we have some glass here, so we can see through it like it is a piece of glass. And I do like the glass inside of V-Ray. I think it does look pretty realistic. So now relating to the glass, there is also, oh, you can also change the glossiness of the glass itself. So the glass is going to be rough, but there is going to be glossy over the top from the actual glossiness. But let's set this to be glossy 1. We can also change the IOR to be something like water or glass. And then we have fog color. I don't know why fog depth is here and fog color is here. But anyway, if I choose fog color, set this to be like blue, we can see that the edges are darker and the center parts are more clear. And that's related to the fog depth. I believe it's saying how far through the glass will it travel before it picks up that color. And this is saying I want it to be able to travel. Let's say I want it to travel more through the glass. I can add I believe it's called a float value, V-Ray float, which is basically just a value, and plug that into fog depth. And if I set that to be 10, we can now see that the rays are able to travel further through the glass before they pick up this color. It's probably a better way to describe that. But anyway, that's how you get this like architectural glass where the edges are slightly different. So I do think this also looks very, very accurate. Inside of Blender, you need to use like absorption and maybe some other tricks, but V-Ray is simply just choose the color and it just works, which is really nice. So that's basically how the basic material is set up. And let's talk about materials now. So let's add another object. Right, so I'm going to add a chair. I believe just a simple one will be good. Like, oh, these are obviously all part of iMesh. So if you're looking for some chairs, we have quite a collection. Let's add this one. Right, so we have a nice chair here. So we have these nodes set up and we want to convert it. So I have found this converter here. And if you go to this link, this is where you can download the converter, and that's by a guy called Zorian. And if you go to Edit, Preferences, and Converter, and you just install that. There was also a V-Ray converter, but this didn't work for me, but the material one did. And you basically get given these nodes. These ones in red, you have to pay for them, so they're not available here, but these ones are free. So you can convert the current active material. Now, I don't know how far the conversion can actually go, so I'm just going to clean this up a little bit. So let's just delete these, and let's plug this one into here as well and delete this one. So just clean up the materials, make it easier. Those nodes were related to sheen, so I can add the sheen. Actually, let's actually keep that. If I go over that, that's this one here. So let's keep this node, this one. I think I might use that as a reference in a sec. And then there we go. So now we have this node set up. I can then click Convert Active to V-Ray, and it creates these nodes here. So as you might remember, this, for some reason, is set to, by default to this value, which is wrong. This should be 0. Like I said, if you add a new material, that's how it works. Now, I don't know what other settings here are not the default, because if you go to here and go to Properties, there are a whole more settings which might be set incorrect. So I'm just going to delete this and re-add a new one. So V-Ray material. Right, I'm going to plug that into here. I can then plug the diffuse into diffuse. I can then plug the roughness into the reflection glossiness. I believe get intensity and this one are the same. I couldn't find any differences. I thought it was something related to non-color data, but this appears to work for me. So this is also roughness. So what I'm going to do is click on here, press N, go to reflection and set that to be use roughness. That will then invert that value. And then we have a normal map. It's actually called V-Ray normal map. You can plug that color into here and plug the color into the bump. That's basically how the basic setup is. Metals get here, metals go in here, and sheen goes, I'm not going to do the sheen right now, but that will get plugged into sheen amount. And let's see how this looks, because in my tests, there's going to be some problems. So let's just... Right, I am also using, I switched over to GPU because I was having a problem recording it, and GPU for some reason doesn't use these values. So my UVs are incorrect. So I'm just going to go into edit mode, press A, U, UV editor, A, and scale with S, type in 4, scale that by 4 times, and now that will be the correct scale. So now I can just delete that. So now, but now we can see there's no reflections. So I'm going to change the reflection color to be something a bit brighter like this. And we can see that this is looking pretty good. So we can have the glossy map is looking good. Let's actually set this to be black so we can see it a bit easier. So basically, as you'd imagine, this is a leather. So the raised areas get brushed more. So they will be smoother or more glossy than the dips, which are more rough. So that looks good. Let's plug this back into here. Now before there was actually a hue saturate node. To get that, all you type in is Shift A and type in color correction. And it's this one here. You can just plug that into here. And then you press N and you can adjust the values here. So you can adjust the hue, you can adjust the saturation, and there's hue tint, there's a bunch of other things. There's lightness, so you can increase the brightness, you can increase the contrast. If you can actually increase the contrast, but you can also set it to advanced, and you can adjust the contrast with even more detail. So, but let's just set it to standard. That's fine by me. So I will set the maybe saturation to be minus 0.5. And there we go. Now you'll also notice that there are two materials on this object, but they both have the same material. And that's because the second one doesn't yet have the V-Ray material nodes. So I'm going to click, I'm just going to click on convert active to V-Ray. And again, let's just clean up a bunch of stuff. Let's just delete all of this and plug this one into the glossy roughness and set the reflection color to be a brighter color. And now let's just disconnect the bump because I want to show you it first over here. So let's do a render preview. Now the bump here is looking okay, but if I disconnect this and set the glossiness, the reflection to be 1. Okay, this is maybe working now. Basically the problem I had, maybe it's CPU related. Let's go to CPU and render preview. Right, we can see that this is now looking very strange. And that's because the bump strength is like way too strong. If I set this to be 0.1 or 0, we can now see that that looks how it should do. If I set that back to 1, it's very, very, very bumpy basically. So it's almost black. So if I go to here and go to bump, this is a normal map. So you should set it to normal map tangent space. Now that does look a lot better. However, actually that's set to be 100% glossy. We can see that there are some artifacts, which is very strange because the bump map is set to 1 and it's like it's way too strong. If I decrease this to 0.1, this looks better. But I don't know at this point how strong my normal map should be to make it look like how it did before. And before I start getting these artifacts. It is obviously more obvious with a very glossy material, but this is just quite strange. Let's have a look at GPU. Yeah, so there's still some artifacts here. But anyway, this is usually for a very glossy material. I start getting that artifacts, but I don't know if that's a bug or if I'm just doing something wrong. I need to jump into the forums, but for some reason it wouldn't let me in the forum. But anyway, this is now looking a little bit strange for me. This appears to hide the artifacts a little bit, but anyway, let's just decrease this to 0.5 anyway. And that already looks a little bit better. It definitely is. It definitely is. I'm not sure what this value should be. Anyway, so if I set this to be, let's just leave that there and then plug this into the diffuse color. And now we can see a lovely material. Let's increase this to be minus 0.1. Now we have a lovely chair. And I think the reflection is too strong. Let's decrease this to be 0.5 or maybe something like this. Okay, so for me, this reflection value looks the best, I think. Okay, now let's go to the second one. This is also using a roughness. So let's go to material, reflection, use roughness. Okay, now what we can see is that this is like a very rough, this map is too strong. So we can decrease the contrast if we want to, but just to show you another node, you can do Shift A and type in mix. And then we can mix between this one and this one. And we also have here a mix amount. So if I set that to be 1, we now have a completely glossy material. If I set it to be 0, we are now using that map. So if I go 0.5, maybe 0.75, just to go closer and closer to this color instead, I can then increase this to be a bit more appropriate. And that will be fine. So let's go with that. Let's also change the color to be a bit darker. Or we can change this value here. Right, now let's plug in the bump map. And we can see again, this is like a very, very strong bump map. Let's go to the settings. Let's go to bump and set that to be bump tangent space. Not much effect, but let's try 0.1 for the bump. Yeah, maybe just a little bit. This needs some investigation. Okay, so what we have now is a beautiful chair inside of V-Ray. And as you can imagine, you do that for all your objects. So if you have a scene to be converted, all you need to do is just download this add-on to convert it, just change the material, and it should be pretty quick just to go through all the materials to convert. If you want to add some sheen, you can. You can just add some sheen amount here, give it some sheen color like this. And then you can make a nice soft looking object. And if you want to check out what other nodes there are available, just do Shift A. You can see all the materials here. There's also different texture materials. There's also texture utilities, mapping. I can't believe that they've actually added all of these in. Right, I'd recommend you checking this out. It is free. If people are interested in V-Ray, then please do let me know, because I would like to do more videos about it. And if people are using it more and more and more, then I reckon iMesh, we could probably do a conversion of a whole library to make it work with V-Ray as well. But I do want people to let me know first if that is what they actually want to do. I can imagine this taking off quite big just because of V-Ray and how powerful it is. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. If you want to know more information, please let me know, and write your favorite feature into the comments. Thank you very much. Goodbye.